Cool. Here we are. Neil, thanks for joining us. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Psychedelics Day live stream. Today, we're joined by Neil Markey from Beckley Retreats. How are you doing?
I'm great, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Happy to have you here. Where are you joining us from today?
I'm actually in Costa Rica. One of my teammates is here, so I've been kind of co-locating with him for a bit.
That's outstanding. And where are you originally from?
I grew up in Frederick, Maryland, which is like an hour north of Washington, D.C., small town.
Great.
You?
Cool. I'm originally from New Hampshire, so a little bit of East Coast energy there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So today I kind of want to profile you. I want to profile Beckley Retreats and kind of share kind of origin stories and how and why you got interested in psychedelics as kind of interesting tools for humans.
Sounds great.
Yeah, let's talk really high level before we dig into you. Like, what is Beckley Retreats?
Beckley Retreats is a public benefit corporation headquartered out of the United States that runs integrative health programs with mushrooms.
Great.
Yeah. And it's an offshoot of the Beckley Foundation and Amanda Fielding, which we can talk about more as we jump in.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, let's definitely plan on that. So let's talk about you and your path towards mushrooms, and then we'll go into the other story. So how like what was your career? Like how did mushrooms come up for you?
Yeah, I usually start my story. I was studying math at University of Maryland, thinking I might go to the intelligence agencies and work on cryptology. And then September 11th happened while I was there. You could actually see the smoke from the Pentagon at the top of the football stadium. Long story short, I joined the ROTC program, finished school, went in as a lieutenant, thinking I was doing the right thing and believed that weapons of mass destruction narrative, if you remember that. By the time I got through school and training and ended up in Iraq, we had learned that that was not accurate. And so that was quite challenging being there, knowing that. And then I came back from Iraq and got a chance to go try out for a small special operations unit called the Ranger Regiment. And I went to Afghanistan twice with them. And I was more on the support side at this point in my career. I was a captain in more planning missions, but the intensity of that unit left its marks on me for sure. And part of me loved it. Leroy Petrie got the Medal of Honor when I was there. His locker was right next to mine. It was Pat Tillman's old battalion, and he was this NFL professional football player that gave up his contract to come serve. So it was in many ways larger than life and, wildly traumatic. I mean, and I was the lucky one. When I was on my first Ranger deployment, some of the guys were on their 10th or 11th or 12th. I mean, it was pretty wild. And I got out in 2012 and went to grad school. And when I was in grad school, that's when, things started to maybe fall apart a little bit. Even though in some ways I was doing really well professionally, I was struggling. I was isolating. And the thing that really changed it for me was meditation. I got introduced to meditation by a guy that was doing his PhD. And I just knew I needed it. And then through that network, over the next few years, this is like 2012 to 2015, I had the chance to have some professionally facilitated psychedelic experiences, and those were incredibly meaningful for me and felt like they were enhancing or accelerating what I was trying to do with meditation. So that's kind of the beginning, and then there's quite a bit in between then and now, but I'll pause for a minute.
Yeah, man, that's fascinating. It's such a common discussion, like Rangers are pushed really hard. I have a lot of friends who are veteran Rangers, and like the degree to which y'all were pushed is incredible, and that you're able to keep up with it for so long is incredible. But it comes at a cost, and we don't really talk about that. And a lot of kind of like Delta SEAL types, they get kind of more of the limelight, for whatever reason, justified or unjustified. And they're pushed really damn hard too. And like the I read some of these books so I could understand the veteran topic more. I forget. It was I think he was like a retired police captain, maybe. He was like on violence and on killing, and like there's like some really helpful information in there about like how do we keep people healthy. And it seems like police forces are kind of catching on a little bit in my conversations with Sarko, the Boston police officer, but I don't necessarily see the armed forces kind of getting straight on like how do we kind of back off on people. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. What do you want to say there?
I think it's changing. I think that um, individuals are kind of seeking, to take ownership of their own mental health. There's more ways to learn. Knowledge is more accessible. And then I think even within the VA and within the DoD, there's more of a focus on it now than there was 10 years ago, and for sure more than there was, during Vietnam era or earlier. So I think we're making progress. It's a tough one. The service is a tough one because kind of by the nature of the work, you have to train people a certain way. And then, there's chances for them to get exposed to things that are that most people don't get exposed to. And so, but it's the nature of the work, so there's really no way around it. But I
Hmm.
think we're actually making quite a bit of progress on the whole.
I love that. Yeah, one of my friends, we actually did this maybe 5 years ago. Was doing a series of like Veterans Day episodes, and he he was a ranger and was talking about just like how overutilized he was becoming, even immediately after wildly traumatic situations. When any reasonable doctor would say you got to get pulled back, like you're swallowing 20 to 40 pills a day and you're vomiting blood, and we're going to put you, on the front lines. Like that's wild. And that was a while ago, but that was touching to like hear that from a friend.
Yeah. Now, I mean, one of the things too in that special operations community that is a big topic is the traumatic brain injury, and you can have that from acute events like an explosion, or I hit my head pretty hard on a jump and had a TBI, or you can get it from kind of smaller repeated concussions like firing guns. And when I was in the service, I can tell you when I had my head injury, there wasn't any. We didn't do anything. I just like took some
Hmm.
ibuprofen and went back to it. And then, but now there's a whole whole new way of thinking in place, and guys actually do get pulled off the line, and it's more accepted for guys to go take a timeout and heal because the culture's changed, and that's just more accepted. So things are changing.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Cool. So, meditation obviously super helpful for so many reasons. People, that's a great first line thing to try out. I think it's a potentially a more appropriate first line thing than even psychedelics, but I think they influence each other in very helpful ways. Yeah, did you notice that at all?
Yeah, I think they're really complementary, and um, if we're going to give people these experiences, I think it's even more helpful to help them build some of these foundational practices like meditation and you know breathwork exercises. I think that makes the experiences safer, and I think you get longer, more durable outcomes if you actually introduce some behavior change and some better habits. So yeah, I'm a big believer. I think we as an organization are big believers in trying to teach people these skills and not have it just over focus on the mystical experience, although there's tremendous value and potential in that. But you can get more out of it, and you can reduce risk by getting all the context around it better.
Right. Yeah. Um, absolutely. So you had some success with mushrooms. What came next for you?
I had some LSD experiences in a similar way. So professionally facilitated eye or eye mask, headphones, um, relatively large dose, and then I mean I think over the years I've tried most psychedelics outside of iboga and ibogaine.
Hmm.
Um, and what can I say on the whole? I think they all have their place, and um, we mentioned it earlier, but context is incredibly important. Who you're with, where you are, what you do before, what you do after. Um, it's very different than how we're brought up in the existing system, where you just kind of take a pill and you go on about your day, and it's going to do its thing. You got to flip that. It's really, you got to show up with some buy-in to get the most out of it and reduce risk.
Right. Absolutely. Um, yeah, I've been there was this episode of that show Homeland, and it was called Context is King, and I just always come back to that, and not just for healing, but for almost everything. Right? It's really important, and yeah, you can have you know damaging experiences, meh experiences. You can have these pleasurable healing experiences, like being with your friends or whatever it is, and feeling really safe. Um, how I've done a lot of my healing. And yeah, then you can have these very intentional, very structured moments with professional guidance. And I love that. And like, this is kind of where I'm like wanting to pivot towards Beckley, but I'm sure there's a couple more things that happened for you before we get there. Like this whole thing of like, how did you start getting in touch with Amanda and the Beckley organization?
Yeah, it was a pretty serendipitous series of events, but the short is I made a lot of progress in those grad school years on myself, spiritually,
Hmm.
emotionally, physically. And after grad school, went and did a teacher certification in meditation at Jefferson University, and for a period of time was working on a small business with my brother back in my hometown and teaching meditation. And so I was, had purposeful work, had good community, wasn't drinking alcohol, strong meditation practice. You do all these things and then life really syncs up, it's less
Mm.
anxious and more smooth. And then I had been deferring this job offer with McKinsey and Company, which is a big consultancy that has a lot of mystique around it. And I think the curiosity drew me towards it. But I asked for another deferral to keep doing what I was doing, and they basically said no. And so I ended up going there, and part of me loved it. I learned a lot. I was with some really amazing people, but it was also a pretty intense work environment. And I think if I'm honest, my mental health maybe started slipping in those years, even though I had like a good base. It just was tough to keep up, even though I did well by some metrics. And then I got recruited to go to this boutique consultancy that was doing private equity portfolio company restructurings, which I refer to as more like bare knuckle capitalism. It was pretty bad. It was all about money, and it was make it as fast as possible. And that's just not me. I come from a lower middle class family from Frederick, Maryland, and I ended up in an environment that just wasn't meant for me. And there was just this massive dissonance, and it started making me unwell. And then there was this period of time where I realized that some of my symptoms were coming back from my time in the service. And I'm
Hmm.
looking around at a lot of my peers, and many of them went to impressive schools and had these super successful families, and they were exhibiting similar symptoms, maybe not as
Mm.
bad, but they were having trouble in their relationships. They were overweight. They were anxious. They were drinking alcohol. They were on prescription meds, high performers, but out of sync. And so I just got to a point where I was like, I'm leaving. And I left and I got back to teaching meditation. And then I ended up in Mexico, um, just looking to create some space and reset. And there's a local indigenous people there called the Huichol. They've been using plants for thousands of years, and I was spending time with them. And then friends were coming down, and I was connecting them to the Huichol, and I was teaching
Mm.
meditation. And I had been on a lot of programs myself and had a lot of benefit. And I saw that the world was shifting and there was more openness to this work. And I said, well, maybe I could do this professionally in some way. And I
Mm.
saw some of the fast money moving in, and I knew those playbooks. I'd seen them. And I knew that this work required a different approach. And so I went to kind of look for partners that I thought were capable, but also had good hearts and were trying to do this with the right intention. And I got connected with Amanda and her family through a grad school friend, and they had been looking for an entrepreneur, and I had been looking for some resources and support. And when we overlaid our plans and kind of how we were thinking about what we wanted to do, there was a lot of almost a freaky amount of synchronicity. And so we said, let's try and do this. And so we started coming up on 4 years ago. And we're a US based company with programs in Jamaica and the Netherlands, where we can do these integrative health programs fully legally.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to circle back to Amanda. Like, wait, can you tell me any kind of like, and tell the audience anything about what it was like meeting Amanda? Like, because she's such a legend in the space.
She really is a legend.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's extraordinary. We met on the phone a few times before we finally met in person, but I had so much respect for her just through her work and what I knew about her. But then when I met her, it was magic. I mean, this woman has gone against the grain for her entire life. For most of her life, the world thought she was nuts, and her family keeps all of these press releases, news articles from the UK press, where they were just dragging her through the mud for decades, and she just kept going. And it's just such a testament to heart and perseverance. And, and I just have so much respect for her too, because it was really never about the money for her. Now she comes from a position of she's been very fortunate, so she's able to work on things in a different way, but she was never trying to really capitalize on this work. She just believed that it was helpful and wanted to get it out there and wanted to do good research and get it to more people. So, I really have such a extraordinary amount of respect for her and feel like she's a real hero that we need more people like her, that are selfless and pushing against the grain to do what they think is right. So yeah, she's a really extraordinary human being.
Yeah. Cool. And what can you tell us about the law in Jamaica? Like this, when we started finding out about it in like 2017, it was kind of this like quiet secret that only a handful of people knew about, but we were yelling from the mountaintops like, hey, this is interesting and available right now. But
Yeah.
not too many people jumped right away, but you guys, at the right time, it seems like, got involved.
Yeah. Jamaica's interesting. So, when the US started the crackdown and made a lot of these compounds Schedule 1, including mushrooms, then through the UN, they pressured most of the other countries in the world to adopt similar policies, because that's just how the United States has worked for quite some time. And most countries signed this UN agreement saying that we're going to do something similar, but then they have to go through their own legislative process to enact the laws. And Jamaica signed the UN, said we're going to do it, and then never enacted the laws. So there's just no prohibition around psilocybin in Jamaica today. So it's legally the same as us getting together a group and giving them chamomile tea legally, right? Now, where there's nuance and it's important is you then can't make any claims, because we're not offering medical diagnosis or treatment. And we have to be super clear in your materials that that's the case. And we have to reemphasize that all the time, because if you're doing that, then you're within a whole different kind of legal framework, medical framework within Jamaica. And so, we're explicitly non-medical. Our programs are for personal professional development. We screen out severe indications and try and get people that aren't a good fit for our programs pointed to more appropriate care. But it's in some ways a loophole, but a very like legitimate, grounded loophole. And I hope that Jamaica. I think right now there's some processes going on where Jamaica is going to try and have some more control around, and I think we need that. Frankly, we need that everywhere. It's like a bit of the wild, wild west. We need more common standards, and we need more checks and balances. I think that Jamaica has real potential to lead and be a standard bearer here, because it's one of the most mature markets for it in the world.
Right. It really is. It's almost a decade of activity from what I understand. And cool. Do you know if the attention with the Jamaican government's more coming from their kind of equivalent of FDA, kind of like agriculture group? I heard a lot of their leadership was really interested years ago, but haven't followed it.
Yeah, I think that it's across the board. It's that group. It's travel's interested in it. The equivalent of the FDA's interested in it. I mean, it's becoming more and more known, and more and more people are going to Jamaica specifically for this. So there's a lot of interest in trying to make it more safe and bring it more above board.
Yeah, right on. So okay, let's talk about what you have for infrastructure currently in Jamaica. Like I've seen a lot of photos. It's gorgeous. I used to be very close with some folks on your team, and like getting kind of stories, not really from you, but from the side. I was always, pretty psyched about what you've been up to. Like what
Thank you.
Yeah, what do you want to share there about like what's going on the ground?
Yeah, we have a couple properties in Jamaica that we have partnerships with. Our primary one is this incredible property called Good Hope, that has an amazing team, and it was one of the places where we really, really got started in Jamaica. And I just love what's kind of grown in our program in Jamaica. So it's almost like a master's class in Jamaica, because in the preparation, we're talking about the history of Jamaica, the good and the bad. We're also talking about some of the other indigenous plant use. There's a really rich Rastafarian spiritual tradition there, so that's kind of coming alive. And then we're on Jamaican land. We have primarily Jamaican facilitators who have their own traditions, and so they bring this real beauty and richness. And then we're eating Jamaican food, and it's a really just like beautiful experience. It's very different than going and doing this in a doctor's office, although we're super supportive of that. What we're doing is different. It's about connection with the land and the people and what's there. And so it's a really beautiful way to do this work.
So my first experience doing stuff down there, got picked up 5 hours late at the airport, got, shuttled 3 hours away from the airport to the south side of the island from Montego Bay through outrageous roads. And, I've spent enough time in Jamaica where I feel safe about this joke. The two things that go fast down there are cars and money. And like, the cars were going so fast. Years later, I turned into a pretty great Jamaican driver, by the way. But, and my first exposure was harrowing. And what I particularly like just about where you're located is it's really not that far from the airport, and the roads are actually pretty reasonable getting to where Good Hope is from Montego Bay. And what is it, like an hour, maybe less?
Yeah, it can be a bit less depending. We really love Good Hope. It's amazing. And for most people, particularly the East Coast and if you can get a direct flight to Montego Bay, it's a really easy kind of in and out travel.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I spent some time over near Ochos Rios. I spent some time all along that coast in between Montego Bay and Ochos Rios, and it's so gorgeous. And for those that need like extra incentive, the scuba diving and snorkeling is insane. And from what I understand, I haven't done it yet. The North Shore of Jamaica actually has the best surf on the island, to be explored. Have you ever made it over to James Bond Beach, by the way?
No, I haven't.
Please do. It's a
Yeah.
treat. It's not that far. Yeah,
Okay.
it's like a small kind of government-run park, and you pay a couple bucks to get in. It's gorgeous. It's private. It's historic. You got that kind of oh man, am I gonna forget the guy's name? Whoever wrote all the James Bond stuff, Ian Fleming. There's some history there. Yeah. So it's gorgeous, and yeah, I would go back to Jamaica again just to go there, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So I want to talk about what was it like getting kind of started with a retreat. It's not an easy venture. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. But there's a lot of discovery through it. Yeah, can you share kind of how that has gone for you all?
Yeah, it's a challenging business, and then you layer in, the being international, and then this work is inherently sensitive. You're dealing with human beings, and yeah, it just requires a lot of care. It's definitely not a widget factory where you're just like producing something. It's like every program requires a lot of thought and a lot of heart, and it's a lot of energy for the team to do it. And so, yeah, but I think that we've really been finding our stride. I mean, we use NPS, Net Promoter Score, as one of our metrics, and last year we ended the year at an average of 92, which is amazing. So we're figuring out how to properly screen people, prepare people, get them into the right set and setting, and then have really world-class facilitation to have, I think, pretty consistent positive experiences for individuals. But what have we learned? Facilitation is key. Right now it's a bit of the Wild West. You can, there's no centralized governing body around what it takes to be a facilitator. There's some great programs. You guys have a great program. But, this idea of like what makes a really good facilitator, it's hard to find. It's people have to have done a lot of their own work, I think, and it requires a lot of effort. And so, and then if you're going to do these group programs where you're bringing many different people together from all different types of backgrounds with sometimes different, or oftentimes different histories and different desired outcomes, it just takes a whole nother level of professionalism and skill to be able to like properly hold that. And yeah, I think that we've found some of the best out there, some facilitators that are really incredible human beings and come to this work with this humility and sense of service. And I think that's what you want. If you get the facilitation right, you're gonna give people positive experiences. I think we've also learned, we've spent a lot of time and resources on getting feedback on the program and how to sequence the modules and give, the right amount of information at the right amount of time so that people can kind of digest it and make sense of it and start to build habits and things like this. And I think we've made a lot of progress there too. And I think that's helping people prepare for the program and then get the most out of the experiences on the backside.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what how do you frame this when we're talking about like betterment of the well versus like clinical treatment? Like you mentioned you screen people out earlier, but like how do you try to tackle that?
Yeah. Well, we have a screening process that includes a survey, and then we do a call. And what we're screening out is treatment-resistant depression, PTSD, suicidal ideations. We don't take anyone on current psychiatric meds, not because there's a contraindication with psychedelics per se, but it is a signal that there's something there that needs to be managed. So it's just, we're on the more, we're more risk averse than maybe we hope to be in the future, and be able to accept more people into the program. But right now, we're just really focusing on people that, are generally healthy, doing well, because we're going to bring people down to our location for a period of time, and they're going to go back home, and we can't be with them in person. So we need to make sure that they have all the tools and resources and are well suited for our programs, which are, group, and then digital prep, digital integration. And so I think we have aspirations as we go to potentially be able to have programs for these group nature-based skill building programs for more clinical indications, but it's just a different business. You have to have a whole nother level of care and higher facilitator to guest ratio, facilitators that have a different skill set, much more thought on the back end, like where the people are, need to have more in-person support, in the geography where the people live. And so, for us, it was, the industry's still learning, let's focus on a population that is, there's still like tremendous value, but is, easier to manage from a service ops perspective and things like this.
Yeah. That's interesting. I appreciate the caution, because, we see the opposite elsewhere. And I personally kind of am probably on the more risk tolerance side, but I think we need a real spectrum here, because we need to have a lot of the whole industry needs a lot of education, and we need to be doing
100%.
research, and we need to be able to survey people that have come through, oh, you had a XYZ prescription. How did you do 9 months later? Were you cool?
And we're really supportive of the folks that are treating the more clinical end of the spectrum. Like that's tough work. What we're doing has its challenges, but wow, that's a whole nother level. And God bless the people that are doing that. I hope that, we can open up our aperture and people that we're able to serve as we go. But for now, we're focused on our focus.
So what kind of people are you mostly seeing? Is it mostly an American audience? You're getting much like UK or EU folks?
Well, we have Jamaica. That's 100% mostly Americans for sure. And then in the Netherlands, it's mostly from the UK, but then, draw a circle around the Netherlands, good chunk of Europe. But if you go back a few years, it was the UK, France, Germany, a few other European countries. Now we're getting people from all over the world. The Netherlands programs are fascinating. Your average Netherlands program will have 5, 6, 8 different countries represented, and it's countries like Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and India, and countries that maybe we wouldn't even have thought about being open to this work a few years ago, but now people are finding us and traveling. So those programs are magic, because it's all these different people from all these different cultures and backgrounds coming together to do it. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. Well, that's the idea of people coming from kind of Arab nations is super interesting to me. I've been hearing more and more about this, that there is some serious interest over in those countries where we might not exactly expect it. I don't know if you remember this one, Neil. It was maybe 2016 or 17. It could have been even earlier, where a Iranian imam said that psychedelics would be halal if done with in the appropriate container.
Right.
And I remember listening to a podcast somewhat recently by a American Islamic Sufi leader who actually pushed for that. So he was actually going to, I think, Iran to like lobby to say, "Hey, in my interpretation of the religion, like you tell me you're the arbiter here. You tell me if I'm wrong. Are we good?" Eventually, got a really positive ruling, which I think helped likely.
Yeah, I've been hearing this too from sources I trust, although I haven't like researched it. So please kind of take
Hmm.
what I'm saying with a bit of a grain of salt. But it does line up with what you're saying, that there have been some very senior leaders in government and in religious traditions that have had these experiences themselves over the last few years and are now advocating for more people to get access, and that psychedelics might not be the same as alcohol because they can be consciousness expanding as opposed to consciousness limiting, so long as they're done in the right way, which is pretty extraordinary, and I think
Right.
a good signal for what's to come.
Hmm. Agreed. Yeah, I think um, I'm really hopeful. I've been thinking for whatever reason about UAE and Saudi Arabia recently in terms of what could be happening there with psychedelics, and probably already is, honestly. But
Yeah,
also, how can people in who have decades of experience be supporting it? And I know they already are. Like I know
yeah,
Maps was doing stuff with Jordan's leadership, and definitely interest from my side, and like how can we help everybody heal, and like one of the
yeah,
most hot places on the planet, like how do we get people to like have less wounds.
yes, yeah, I agree.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's kind of like a play on Rick Doblin's zero net trauma thing, which is
Hmm.
a lot of people take it literally. I take it metaphorically, and I think it's a really really nice thing.
Yeah,
um Yeah. Do you think that, if we can scale psychedelic healing, we might see some more optimal things happening globally?
I'm an optimist. Yeah, I think so. I think it's coming. I think we might go through some really challenging periods over the next 10, 15, 20 years, but I think ultimately humanity will come out the other side and be living in more equilibrium with each other and with nature. And I think that if you look at actually, um, some other areas of biology or nature where um, there's these periods in ecosystems development where there's a lot of friction and then they smooth out and they become more equilibrium. I think that could
Hmm.
happen for humanity. But man, the next few years, if you add in AI with this type of work, there's going to be a lot of change for sure.
Hmm. That's interesting. Do you think there's any kind of risks to psychedelics generally in terms of like slowing down progress or research or adoption?
Um, you mean like, is the genie going to get put back in the bottle? Um,
But maybe like I've been seeing some rhetoric in the last like week or two that makes me a little uncomfortable, but I also have reason to be hopeful as well.
yeah,
But I think could there be some sort of global pushback against psychedelics that make science funding dry up a little bit, and retreats more difficult to operate, things like that?
yeah. I guess it's possible, but I don't think it's probable. I think that
Hmm.
the genie's out. Your average person is aware. It's hard to find a prestigious university that doesn't have a psychedelic research component in some way now. You've got Aaron Rodgers and Michael Pollan and Prince Harry, and it's in the ether now. And I think that the body of research is so strong that it'll be impossible to kind of put it away. But I
Right.
think there's going to be some blowback, and it's the wild, wild west right now. We have to figure out how to more properly educate people and properly regulate what's happening, because there is risk to these experiences for sure, you know. And so I'm hopeful that we can have those debates, but
Hmm.
not throw the baby out with the bathwater. I hope that we can do better than we did with cannabis. You know, I think cannabis is an example of where it went a bit wrong, where, you know, it was so taboo, and then it was all of a sudden it was for everybody and everything, and there was no risks and there was no education, and everybody and you know, the truth's in the middle oftentimes. um, and I just hope
Hmm.
that we can get this work a little bit, you know, do it a little bit better.
Right. So before I jump to a domestic conversation, like what else would you like people to know kind of about like Jamaica and like maybe the difference between what's offered there and what's offered in the Netherlands?
um, well, people often ask which they should choose, and structurally the program is exactly the same. So I
Hmm.
would solve for ease of travel. These programs are a good bit of work in some ways. It's a lot on the body, you know, and so if you can do it without jet lag, preferable. With that said, Jamaica is an island that's got this, it's just got this vibe to it that I don't know if I've seen it anywhere else. It's really special. And It's a bit wild, and it's just so beautiful. And so, you know, but the Jamaica and the Netherlands are both magic, but the Netherlands is more, you know, it's local architecture, it's local food. So there's this, that there's a difference in feel, but the programs are similar, and you're going to get, you know, the same level of professionalism and quality in either place.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I can't overstate how much I love Jamaica. um, I've yet to visit the Netherlands, but I understand Amsterdam's quite magical. Like how are you positioned relative to Amsterdam,
We're
like
like an
location wise?
hour and a half to the east, so it's pretty
Hmm.
easy to get to. We have two properties in the Netherlands that are both pretty close to the main airport. But we try and find places that are away from everything, so it's a bit of a digital detox. And
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, the land in the Netherlands is beautiful too. The properties that we use there, they're gorgeous.
Yeah, yeah, that's super cool. Okay, so obviously there's some interesting stuff happening in the United States, and a
Hmm.
lot of this goes around state level legalization initiatives. We've seen Oregon and Colorado get approved. There was a you know some problems with the Massachusetts campaign, but that failed. But it's looking positive that other states are going to go. There's more initiatives around decrim legalization today than there ever have been. So,
Sure.
what are your thoughts around these state regulated programs, and then I'll ask you about Beckley's interest after that.
Yeah. I mean, we're super supportive, you know. Let's go. Let's push on the medicalization model, and if a doctor can have mushrooms in their toolkit as an option next to other options, that's great. I hope we can push for um, legalization with education, because I feel like in some ways these experiences are human right, you know, but we need to do them in the proper way, and we need to explain the risks, and, you know, make sure that people are doing them responsibly. But I don't think you need to have some clinical medical indication to get a lot of benefit out of these experiences. I hope we can have that conversation, you know, openly too. Um, I think that we're learning as we go. You know, if you're trying to create an opportunity for businesses to be successful, I think we learned something from Oregon, where if you have a license, um, if there's no restrictions on licensing, then you might have 30 to 35 companies open at once, but there might not be enough local demand for all those companies. So you're not really setting anybody up for success. And so I think we should be a little bit more thoughtful about how we create like market dynamics, because we want these companies to succeed. Um, but yeah, we're super. I think that it's nearly, it's extraordinary how much grassroots support there is, how much support there is in this administration, how many
Hmm.
universities are involved. So I think we've kind of crested a local mountaintop, and we're, these next 5 years, you're going to see a lot of progress. It's encouraging.
So as a company that's operating legally in a legal jurisdiction, it gets a little funky, right? To
Mm-hmm.
step in to Colorado, where you're like, how do I organize now that I'm going to have really weird taxes and potential liabilities? Like how do you all think about it from the Beckley perspective, like getting involved with Oregon or Colorado, for instance?
I mean, we're staying close to it. We're monitoring it. I think something would have to shift at the federal level
Hmm.
for us to actually do something in the U.S. with mushrooms, because again, God bless the folks that are doing it. And I think that if you're a local Oregon business or Colorado business, and you're doing it within Colorado, within Oregon, local bank accounts, um, the risk is incredibly low of the
Mm.
federal government doing something. But if you look at early days of cannabis, I don't think you can rule it out 100%, because cannabis was legal in states, and then the feds were, you know, um, prosecuting. So for us, we won't do it anytime soon. I think something would have to shift,
Yeah.
because as soon as you start crossing state lines, and I mean, there's just some really significant federal laws that you start tripping that are not like small fines. They're, you know, significant charges.
Right.
But we do plan to do some programs in the United States, but using ketamine, but using a similar approach. So digital prep, group model, nature immersion, skill building. And, I people ask, is ketamine good or bad? When it's like, it depends, like most of these things. It depends on the context and how well it's facilitated. I think that you can give people a really positive, expansive experience if the ketamine's given in the right way, in the right context. So I think we'll do some tests this year with those types of programs.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. I love that. And I'm with you. Um the funny thing I've been coming up against lately is these because we kind of know better in the psychedelic scene, we know that clinicians could be doing better work with ketamine. And like the problem is they're still getting pretty decent results relative to doing nothing or compared to SSRIs, even though they're doing it so suboptimally. So, we get all mortally offended, but also, we've got to check ourselves, because like if we're outperforming conventional psychiatric interventions doing it poorly, just wait until we can do it great, and that'll come.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. I agree.
yeah.
And I think all these assessments, it requires context too, because you got to look at risk benefit profile versus risk benefit profile of what's out there, and what's out there
Mhm.
in many cases is not that great, and so, like you said, if we're beating that, we got to be careful throwing stones without the proper context.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds to me like you all are following the thinking of this new administration around psychedelics. Like, do you have any kind of like rumors or insights you could share about what's getting discussed at the federal level? Like, I've been trying to get involved, and then I kind of like chilled. I was like, like plenty of people with more resources are going to handle this, and hopefully they do the right things.
Yeah, I mean, again, we kind of made a strategic decision that we weren't going to, you know, enter the U.S. with mushrooms until something changed. So we're kind of passively paying attention, but all the
Hmm.
things that I've heard are quite positive, and I think you can, extrapolate from what we're seeing in the news and what RFK has said publicly, what Elon Musk has said publicly, what people that are in and around this new administration's orbit have said publicly. I think that Veterans, wow, that's really reached a crescendo around making some change for veteran healing. You've got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and on one side and Dan Crenshaw on the other. I mean, I don't know if you could find one thing that they would agree on, but they agree on expanding access for veterans to get psychedelic healing. So we've reached this kind of moment where there's really some breakthroughs. I mean, for the first time ever, the DoD is putting their strategic plan to study psychedelics for veterans. I mean, you've got tremendous amounts of philanthropy and people that are in really significant positions of power. Rick Perry is down in Texas. I mean, beating the ibogaine drum. Like they're gonna make some movements this year for sure in Texas because it's got the support and it's got the right leadership to get it done. So, yeah, I think that we're really, really optimistic that there's going to be some shifts.
What I've been speculating about lately is kind of access models that don't necessarily involve completed FDA clinical trials. So some sort of pseudo clinical access model with incomplete, trials on drugs, because, the data is pretty good. I don't know if it's complete, but it's good. And like, I think there's a lot of ways that this could get rolled out, right? It could be like wildly expensive, no insurance kind of reimbursement. There could be some sort of, I don't know, like robust inclusion in the VA and also for active duty folks, which would be really interesting.
Yeah.
Because
We've been working on some. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, there's some things happening on a couple different at the state level that would allow for potential access, particularly for veterans, to do these kind of like group healing experiences. And yeah, I think that we'll see something happen at a state level where you would get essentially some federal authorization within the law to be able to do some research on these experiences. And I agree too. I hope that the FDA moves more towards really just like focusing on like asking the risk question, and leave the efficacy question up to doctors and their patients, because I don't know, the FDA, it complicates things when you need to do that. And I think that we need people to be able to take more ownership of their own well-being and with the counsel of their doctor be able to make some of these decisions themselves, So I hope we're moving more towards that. I think there's some reason to believe that we're shifting that way.
Yeah, I tend to think that would be helpful. Because we need to figure out a way to make drug development better and cost less. And like right now, the costs are such that only very select groups of people can develop drugs well. I guarantee there's more effective ways to coordinate these things. MAPS, like being a nonprofit for as long as they were, did an amazing job. Definitely stinks that they didn't win, but with Lycos, a recent decision, but they will eventually. I'm told the Gracias thing went through and plenty of cash to bring it over the finish line. And we'll see how it gets executed. I'm really curious to see. And like, oh, you know what? I'm realizing that we're close to the end of our time here together, because you have a hard stop. So, all right, let's talk about like what should people remember about retreats, and how can they find out more?
Yeah, well, we're easy to find. You can just Google Beckley Retreats, and we do one-on-one calls or group calls, and we're super responsive. We're a relatively small company that's putting a lot of heart into this. And what to remember about retreats? Well, they're not for everyone, and they're not for everything, but for some people, there is extraordinary positive potential. But you got to ask the right questions. You got to take some ownership to do the research and ensure it's the right fit for what you're looking for.
Love that. And what's your website?
BeckleyRetreats.com.
Perfect. All right, man. Well, Neil, Markey, thanks so much for joining us. I hope we
Thank
can
you,
do it
Joe.
more. We got into
Yeah.
some really interesting stuff at the end.
Likewise. Yeah. We look forward to figuring out ways to work with you guys. We really appreciate what you've done for the field. So thank you.
Absolutely. And yeah, stay tuned, everybody. Could be a really fun one. All right.
See ya.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.